Welcome, everybody. So good to see so many people here toward the end of a conference, no less. We know that we are the ones standing between you and lunch and cocktails and other things, but you did pick the best session of all of ASU+GSV, and we're going to have a nice, lively discussion about high-dosage tutoring. As everybody knows, we're coming off of what has been the most disruptive period in our education system's history, with so many students needing so much support to make sure that they stay on track for a highly successful school experience. High-dosage tutoring being one of those areas that is going to play a big role in that work. My name is Ryan Stewart. I was most recently the Secretary of Education in New Mexico, where my administration earmarked a significant amount of funding to make sure that we could provide the kind of high-dosage tutoring to our students throughout the state. And I'm incredibly pleased to be joined by this remarkable panel of experts who are going to help us dive into, as the name says, the ABCs of high-dosage tutoring and what it means. And we're going to have a lively discussion. I'm not going to go through all of their impressive bios. I'll let you read them. But I will ask, and we'll go down the line here, I'll ask each of you to say your names, what you do, and then briefly, in hopefully 30 seconds or less, talk about what is high-dosage tutoring, how is it different than the tutoring as maybe you've come to know it, and what's your role in high-dosage tutoring? And we'll start with Susanna.
Hi, I'm Susanna Loeb. I direct the Annenberg Institute at Brown and also founded something called the National Student Support Accelerator with the goal of really expanding access to high-impact or high-dosage tutoring. And what I think it is a relationship-based tutoring that can target students' academic needs, engage them in school, and really accelerate their learning in ways that no other kind of intervention has shown to do. And I think it's really central to this moment of great need and great opportunity. So I'm really excited to be here today and to discuss the kind of potential, even if we're also discussing some of the difficulties in getting it in and getting students to have access to this opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree, Susanna. It is, high-dosage tutoring is absolutely critical to furthering educational equity in this country. My name is Shaan Akbar. I'm co-founder of Tutored by Teachers. We serve high-dosage tutoring virtually powered by teachers. What I believe high-dosage tutoring is, well, actually let's start with what it isn't. It's not homework help. It's not touch-and-go, self-serve homework help. It is a dedicated, high-quality instructor engaging with the student multiple times a week, 2 to 3 times a week for 2 to 3 hours a week, consistently in a sustained way, and making that human connection, bringing a whole child approach, reflecting the child, and furthering their SEL and their academic outcomes.
Okay, I'm Carolyn Carhart-Quezada. I'm from Cignition. We do math online tutoring. And when I think of what is high-dosage tutoring, I think of personalized learning for all students. I think of accelerating learning so that students you can address gaps in their prerequisite skills to give them the background knowledge to learn new content in their classroom. A lot of what we do in online tutoring is group tutoring, and that can be anywhere from 2, 3, and 4 students. And in those type of situations, you're going to see a lot of collaboration. And that collaboration helps them learn the subject matter, but it also helps them gain their self-confidence. And when you gain self-confidence, you have more ownership in your learning, you're more motivated, and you're enjoying what you're doing.
Good morning. My name is Donald Fennoy. I am the former superintendent of the school district of Palm Beach County in Palm Beach, Florida, the 10th largest school district in the country. Today I'm a resident with a company, the largest high-dosage tutoring company called BookNook. And I chose that opportunity because I wanted to understand the ed tech space, and living in Florida and leading during COVID in Florida, we didn't get to close schools, so we had to figure it out. And so when I think about what high-dosage tutoring means to the profession, which means to our kids, this is a value add and an asset that should become institutionalized in the teaching process. It should not be something, it should be part of what it is every day. because teachers right now need all the help that they can get. And so having this opportunity to have high dosage tutoring as an institutionalized part of every classroom in the country is how I look at high dosage tutoring.
All right, good morning. My name's Emily Fernandez. I am the Chief Schools Officer at Hebrew Public. We are a small public charter school organization in New York, based out of New York. We have 3, soon to be 4 schools in New York and 1 in Philly. And in my role, I coach and manage our school principals. So I work with them on school-wide strategy, the many challenges they have faced in the past 2 years, and also particularly looking at how those challenges play out for our kids and how we're responding to it. And high-dosage tutoring is one of the key aspects we're looking at. When Susanna, I'm saying correctly, yes? All right. When Susanna was describing it, I was like, right, this is what the best teachers do. The best teachers have tight relationships with one-on-one small groups of kids, pull kids here, there, after lunch, after school in the morning. And it's not sustainable to respond to the need we're seeing. And so we are currently partnered with Tutored by Teachers, that Shaan is one of the co-founders of. And we're looking at that as an experiment of how do we add capacity, because our teachers are doing everything they can. We already need more and more from them and more of them. And so I think this is one of the critical ways we can try to respond to what kids need as well.
Great. So now that we know a little bit about what high dosage tutoring is, when we think about the moment that we're in, the role that the pandemic has played, what role do you see high dosage tutoring playing in helping students recover from what has been a disruptive couple of years? Donald, I'd like to start with you on this question. What role do you see this playing?
Well, I think it's a critical role. I mean, again, even though in Florida we were able to keep our schools open during the pandemic, there are certain realities. So I'm a child of poverty from Detroit, Michigan. My dad was in the U.S. military, not an officer. My mother and father and I all went to college the same year in 1994. But now I'm in a position where my children don't live like that. So when my children have issues, I pay someone to tutor them, right? And so the question that I often pose is, how come every child doesn't have access to someone to help them, either when they're struggling with academics, or in my son's case, for him as an 8th grader who will be going to high school as a junior, helping with his calculus courses at 13, right? So this idea of where does it fit? So I look at the harsh realities of what we're describing. We use the term recovery. Listen, I got kids in Palm Beach County and all over this country that were not having a great educational experience before this thing happened, right? And so all it did was put a magnifying glass on an issue that many of us were skirting around, which is access to high-quality teachers, high-quality programs in a sustainable, scalable way. And so I think now we're in a position where high-dosage tutoring has to be part of the recipe, not something that is a privilege for the few, but it has to be part of the integral part of the relationship between teaching and learning.
Emily, curious your perspective at the school level, operationalizing it. What role is it playing for you?
Yeah, I think as with most great ideas, and certainly being here at this conference, I'm thinking of this constantly. It's how do we make this actually work on the day-to-day level with the staffing structures we have, with the space requirements we have, with the tech supplies we have. What we've done is try to build it into our existing schedule. So where we have guided reading or a differentiated block for students already be working in groups, now instead of having one teacher in the room who can pull a small group, or potentially 2 if we can double staff it and everyone came in that day or we didn't have vacancies, we now have another person who can provide targeted, standards-aligned, data-driven, small group instruction. And so we're piloting it in a couple of small ways. One of our schools in particular has been doing it really around math in our younger grades and seeing a lot of traction on that. My question as I look to the future is, how do we scale this so that even in schools where we're doing it, it's not only X percentage of kids who are able to get it, but that our kids who are below grade level, at grade level, accelerated, are all getting some individual support targeted to their needs. Because the reality is that's not what's happening currently.
Susanna, as a researcher, someone who studies this, looks at it from a lot of different angles, what's your take on the role it can play, what data is saying about its impact, and how this can help us in this moment?
Yeah, so when the pandemic happened and kids started being out of school or just having to be out even if their school wasn't closed, we went back to the research literature, which, you know, has been going on for quite a while, and there are hundreds of studies on tutoring, and it really emerged as kind of the only approach that takes kids from where they are and can accelerate them back up, or for students who, again, aren't working at grade level, maybe they're working above it, it again can accelerate their learning. So I really do think it's central to the response to the pandemic. We kind of have unprecedented levels of students who missed some things and not others and are behind, but not behind in the same way as another student did. You've really got to actually understand what students know and what they don't know. And the student's not going to tell you that. You've got to have a structured way of figuring that out. And then you've got to work with it, work with the students from there. So I think it is the approach that we need to use. And I think one thing to keep in mind when we're thinking about how hard it is to implement, it is difficult, and we're working with districts around the country, and we see that in places that have extra adults in the building or that have intervention periods, it can go in pretty smoothly, but in places that don't, it's much harder. And one of the conclusions from that would be, oh, well, we can't do it because it doesn't fit in with the way that the schools are structured. But the other is to think of this more in the long term and think, how can we restructure schools to make this easier to fit in? Because we don't really, at least from the research, have any alternative that actually meets the needs of students and can not only address pandemic-related needs, but really the lack of educational opportunities that we've offered so many students in the country to date. So, you know, I think we've seen in the research that you might get 6 months or even a year and a half of extra learning from this kind of tutoring, and that seems to be the best thing that we've seen so far out of any kind of intervention.
So Shaan and Carolyn, curious your thoughts. Emily brought up this notion of scale, and then Susanna's brought up this notion of integrating with the school schedule. How many kids can we realistically reach by going into this model, knowing the difficulties of finding people, the difficulties of integrating with the school schedule? How would we think about that from a systems perspective?
Well, no, please.
Okay, I can go ahead and start with that. Well, one of the things that Cignition does is our tutoring is online, which gives us a big advantage because you can hire tutors all over the world. They don't have to be next to the school district that wants tutoring. So we have a rigorous interview process, but again, there's lots of candidates to choose from. In addition, one of the things we're doing at Cignition to lower the cost, and a lot of school districts are asking for this, is to do group tutoring. So group tutoring can typically be 2, 3, or 4 students in a group. And when you do that, you need a lot less tutors. So for example, if a school district comes to us and say they want us to tutor 1,000 of their students, if it's one-to-one tutoring, it's 1,000 tutors that we need. If it's group tutoring, say 4 students and 1 tutor, it's 250 tutors. And these tutors have different time zones, so they can take multiple sessions during a school day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get tremendous scale doing that, and you bring down your cost per student per hour to be accessible. And you know, when you're talking about paying a tutor, like a high school kid or a college grad, $15 an hour, you could be paying a credentialed teacher, like Tutored by Teachers, $36 an hour, more, $40 an hour, and still getting those, still getting those per student per hour costs. And what I'll say is, in terms of scale, I mean, we have to be really high, we have to be ruthless in prioritization, and we have to, we have to target the tier 2, tier 3 kids, bring them in, and we have to scale this up. We have to pilot it. I mean, that's how it works when we partner with a Hebrew Public or an Indianapolis. We're starting with a few hundred kids, and then we integrate into the school day, and then we expand the grade, and then we expand into schools, and this is Tutored by Teachers or Cignition or BookNook. We can't hero this. This has got to be a national effort. And these are fucking kids. I mean, pardon my French, like, this is, we are in a national crisis. There's massive teacher turnover, massive admin turnover, and even parents are defecting from our district schools. What are we doing? And we're calling in the National Guard, and we're calling in the National Guard, and we're trying to find subs, and we're showing the world and we're showing teachers that we think school's babysitting. It's not babysitting. Let's stem the bleeding, and let's build some infrastructure to build in high dosage tutoring, which is fundamentally intervention, small group, because 30 to 1 sucks, and we have to fix it. And so that is what we have this is a call to arms, and we have to answer it. So, sorry.
If you don't mind, I think the one piece has to be very, very clear. When I was a high school principal in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and we won the National School of Change Award in 2010, it was because we put an intervention block in so that every student had tutoring every single day from their peers, which was the most powerful piece. And when I say this, because one of the reasons why I ultimately decided to join the BookNook team as a resident, when I was looking at a tutoring company when I was superintendent in Palm Beach, you have to have a damn relationship with the kids. You cannot just have some random person coming into rural Palm Beach in the Everglades, and you have no concept of what these kids live with and deal with every single day. And so let me just say this, and what I've observed in my 4 or 5 months working with BookNook and meeting other people, this shit is hard. It is very hard. But again, if you want it to be authentic and meaningful and produce results, we've got to figure out a way for these children to connect with the people on the other side of that screen in a very intentional way, because if not, because let me tell you, as a father of a 13-year-old and a 6-year-old, my kids honestly are learning a lot more from YouTube videos than they're learning from damn books today. And I think we need to process that.
So I know we have a lot of school leaders who are sitting out there and system leaders in the audience thinking, all right, should I invest in this? What's the return on investment if I go down this road? So Susanna, I'd love for you to give us some of that perspective, both on, we've talked about scale. What kind of return on investment should a school system leader think about when they're investing in these programs?
Yeah, so again, I think from the research we see that these programs produce really around 6 months to sometimes a year or a year and a half of additional learning for a year invested. So really kind of big returns in terms of student learning. That says you have to kind of get a good program in there, and it'll take a lot of effort to do that. But I do think it's in some ways our only alternative if we really want to reach all the students. I think there are ways of making this feasible, but it does take new school models where we have kind of more adults working with students. It's an opportunity to diversify the workforce in many ways and to be a pathway for teachers. So some of the really interesting things we're seeing are things like teacher preparation programs from around the country. Instead of teachers observing or teacher candidates observing classrooms, they're tutoring. They're getting experience really teaching students, and that's going to benefit them in the future as teachers and get them into these schools, so it can be a good return that way. Another interesting one is not teacher prep programs, but schools of engineering or mathematics departments at universities. If what you're looking for is something like middle or high school math, that's a really great option and has the great potential to, again, produce a pathway for teachers as well. So I think it is an investment, and I think there's some things that will need to be traded off. You know, some classes could actually be bigger if what it means is some teachers teach somewhat bigger classes, and then the students get to meet individually with adults in tutoring sessions. So in some ways, it's a return on investment, but I wouldn't think of it just as the cost of tutoring. You want to build it into your system and make that system efficient while still thinking, how can I provide this individualized, personalized instruction to students?
Shaan and Carolyn, looks like you guys want to weigh in on this?
No, yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, you get what you put in. Your return on investment, if you put $1 in, you're not going to get a lot back. And I mean, we cannot cut corners here. And you can't have tutors on chat abroad taking care of like 5 kids at a time. You have to be investing in the high quality instructors. Teachers drive double the results of your average peer-to-peer tutor. You need, and I mean, candidly, I mean, yeah, and that you got to invest into it. And that doesn't require just money, but it requires time and admin and ground team capacity. People, and it takes time to stand these up.
And Carolyn?
I just want to say, in terms of return on investment, I mean, there's always improvement in the subject matter, right? But another thing we really have to continue to look at is improvement in student self-confidence. I just had an email a couple days ago from a teacher who said, just wanted to give you feedback on a particular student in my class. She's doing better with the classwork, but what I want to tell you is she finally found her voice. So she is now asking questions, she's answering questions in class, and that just warmed my heart, because that's a big part of it. You can always learn the subject matter, but you need to have that self-confidence to do well in school and to enjoy school.
Emily, you had to face this as a school leader, where you're going to put your money with limited resources. You chose to invest in high-dosage tutoring. Can you talk about what kind of returns you're seeing on that? And now that you've done it, would you make that same decision again?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's never enough money when you're trying to run a school and create like truly an incredible place for kids and an incredible place to work. We are looking at, so one thing that I think is great about people we've partnered with, Shaan's organization, is that they have pretty rigorous internal assessments, and they're very transparent about keeping us up to date, where the kids are at, diagnostics, et cetera. They partner with our school teams. We are looking at our end of year assessment period coming up, be it MAP, a whole number of other assessments that we look at, and one of the things we're going to look at is how are our kids who participate in this pilot, how are they doing in light of other kids with similar profiles academically, socially, interactions socially, and how are they doing on our school-based assessments, so that we can then see what does this look like for the long run. I think undoubtedly, I think there is going to be a benefit. We've already seen that on initial assessments. Academically, certainly. I also think anytime a child can get a lower ratio of adult interaction, it'll be better for all the categories, right? I also think there's a immeasurable return on investment in terms of our full-time staff that they see, that we acknowledge that they are already pulling a group here, they've already got a group independently working, they already are doing something else, and we're adding capacity in with this partnership. My big question, as we look at funding over the next couple years, is how could we scale this, and where is the money going to come from? And I don't have the answers for that yet. If anyone does, let me know. But I do think that's a question for the longer run. And how do we build capacity or our internal school schedule to be adjusted differently so more of our own teachers can do this as well?
So you brought up something that I think is a fear of a lot of school leaders when we hit the end of this cliff of COVID dollars that have been invested into schools. So right now, many schools are flush with those monies. Is this going to be a fad that goes away when we no longer have those monies available? Emily, Donald, would love your thoughts on this when you think about it from your system perspectives.
Yeah, I think it depends on the companies and the providers. If you don't have a high quality product that means that does produce the results, then it's going to be a fad. I think when you think about, so my budget in Palm Beach was $4.6 billion all in. And so the question was, but you have to remember, since the 1900s, all we've done is add to public education. We just added something. So my theory, we were an A-rated district every year I was superintendent. And my theory of action was, let's take something off the plate and just only invest in the things that actually produce results, right? I think that's where a lot of the system leaders are going to have to start making hard decisions, because the cliff is right. We're looking at the cliff, right? We knew it when the money came in, and if you really want to get honest, let's look at how much money has actually been spent so far. It's like 15% of all of it. You're talking about billions, if not trillions of dollars. So I think we're just in a moment in time where we have to make the hard decisions. We run from a lot of these hard decisions, man. And so if we really want this to be an institutionalized part of the kids' experience, then we have to ask ourselves what comes off the plate so that we can invest appropriately and make this part of the normal educational process.
I really appreciate the idea of what comes off the plate, because we always talk about prioritizing, but not about deprioritizing. And so something we've talked about as a small public charter organization is, okay, what are we not going to do well? No one wants to say that, but what are the things we're going to do at a C level and say that is okay because these 4 things must be excellent? This has the most impact on kids, on teachers. And so I do think there's a way to continue this. I think that there's also a way to build internal capacity, because if I'm only looking to an outside partner, that's not a long-term solution in my mind. It has to be one tool. of many. So how do I restructure my staff day, my teachers' days? Are they spending their time doing the things that they are uniquely qualified to? Most of your strongest teachers are best qualified to be your individual tutors, your small group tutors, but they can't because their day is already packed. So where can I take something off? Where can I combine? But it's gonna be challenging. I do think it's part of the long-term plan though, because as Donald said in the beginning, this has just shined a light on challenges that have already been there and deepened them.
Yeah. And Susanna, I know you want to weigh in on this. I'm going to ask you an additional question as well. What kind of accountability systems should we have when we talk about the investments in high dosage tutoring?
Yeah, so one way of thinking of it is accountability. The other is just trying to figure out whether, how big an effect it's having, whether it's having an effect, where it's working well and where it isn't. So I just want to advocate a little, even though it's in my own self-interest, for research on this, because I think that kind of information on how it's working is going to be really important for sustaining it after we do see these funds drop off. There are other funds that I do think we'll be able to work with. The other thing, I think we need data for a number of reasons. One is that, and that's a really important one to keep in mind, and it matters that we look at these outcomes and can present it in ways that are compelling to the public, compelling to the board, compelling to people who are making decisions. But even more important is this is a hard thing to put in. We're all talking about its difficulty. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean it shouldn't go in there, because at this point it's really kind of our only option for something that's really good, but it's not easy to put in. And as a result, you really need to collect information for continuous improvement so you can see where it's working and then make adjustments, because it's never going to be perfect the first time you put it in. If you're putting it in for 3 students, maybe it will be, but if you're putting it in for thousands, it's really unlikely to be. So let's take this time and really collect information, and it can be very high quality research level information, or it could also, I think you've got to supplement that with just regular collection of data to know which student is excelling, which school is excelling at this, and for us across the country, which districts are really doing it well, so that we can learn from the good experiences that are out there.
So it sounds like you're volunteering to help with that data collection, so just make sure you come up and find Susanna after. Shaan and Carolyn would love to get your take on this and also ask you, what does a school have to have in place? What are the enabling conditions in order to make this work?
Okay, well, first I just want to say high quality, and I think we all mentioned it, is key. And I think in order to get that high quality, you need 2 things, and they were both mentioned, but I just want to emphasize, as a tutoring company, you need to really build research into your organization, not think of research as an afterthought, but partner with third-party vendors such as, we partner with Digital Promise and Mathematica, but they have, they're unbiased. They have experience designing research studies, designing RCTs, randomized control trials, and they can really, really improve on the quality of your program. And then our program at Cignition, and I think many other programs, are online, and that gives you the opportunity to be data informed. We are measuring everything. We're measuring how is our training going for tutors, how are the problems working that we're designing, how is the tutor doing in the session, how is the student doing? Because if all these things align well, you're going to give a higher quality program, and that's going to give the students more success. So when I look at what do school districts need to have in place, I think of 3 things. Number 1, I think of stakeholders, I think of equipment, and I think of communication. So let me talk about each of those in a little bit more detail. So it's so important when you start a tutoring program at a school district that the goals of the program, what subject matter, what topics do you want to be covered, and what the expectations are, need to be aligned with key stakeholders. And the key stakeholders are the administrators, the appropriate administrators at the district level, the appropriate administrators at the school, the principal, assistant principal, the teacher, And really important is the student. I can't emphasize enough that the student needs to be bought into this program. They need to understand why they're going to tutoring and what they can expect from tutoring and how it's going to help them. If you don't have the buy-in of the student, they're not going to want to attend, and if they don't attend, you're not going to get the results. And parents are also important. You want the parents to buy into why their child is attending tutoring. Then the second point was equipment. It's online tutoring, so of course you need a computer, a working computer, you need it charged, and you need good internet bandwidth. And that is just a given, but sometimes that doesn't always work out. You also need the proper environment. And I say this because I've seen school districts have their online tutoring take place in a gym where a basketball game is going on, and they expect the students to focus and learn. Or I've seen also online tutoring being done on the playground during recess. The background noise is so loud, the tutor can't hear the students, and the tutor can't concentrate. And then the last thing I want to mention is communication. It is so important to have that close communication between the tutors and the teachers. The teachers need to know what is going on in the tutoring and how the students are doing. And the teachers need to have access to the tutors if they want to communicate how the student is doing or improving in the classroom.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we should just merge. I mean, honestly, she took the words out of my mouth. I mean, we do the exact same thing. And I mean, to sum it up, it's fundamentally partnership. You need deep, deep partnerships with schools to make these work. Yeah, and you need close coordination and deep lean-in. And that's how this gets done. And that partnership flows from just like top of the admin down to the instructor and ultimately centered around the child.
Emily and Donald, what made it work for you guys? What did you have to have in place to make this work?
Well, there's a couple of things you have to have in place, and I think the biggest hurdle that all of you are dealing with is the logistics of it. Getting the kids actually in certain places at a certain time on a regular basis. Y'all act like that's easy. It is very, very difficult. So as an industry, you need to figure that part out. And I think fundamentally, the one thing y'all haven't said that kind of irks me, the whole industry needs to figure out what the definition of the damn thing is. You need a unit, because so I do several things post-superintendents. I coach most of the large urban school district superintendents across the country, and I'm an advisor to several nonprofit and for-profit companies. And if I put them all in the room, you ask them what is high dosage tutoring, none of them know the definition. So I think as an industry, y'all need to come up with a definition so that we can speak the same language so we can start moving towards a goal that actually makes sense globally.
Emily,
I feel like, Susanna, you have a definition for us.
We do, and we actually got a group nationally together to write some standards, and they're up on the National Student Support Accelerator website. And you know, they'll change over time because it's based on what we know now, but it really is our best guess, and not just kind of my best guess, but this group of a really diverse and informed group of people put it together. So I think that's at least one place you can go for a start for that.
Yeah, I think that it's an important point of what is high dosage, right, tutoring. And I think the reality is most schools are not going to be able to do a one-to-one setup. You know, partnering with City Year, teaching, everyone's talking about, oh, well, we can bring in X, Y, Z. We also know that's more people to manage, that's more quality to control for. So I think the idea of 2 to 4, and reality is most of our groups are 4 students consistently 3 to 4 times a week, half-hour to 40-minute sessions. I think getting the kids there, that's why we've put it inside the school day. Our schools are diverse by design. Our kids come from a whole host of backgrounds, and the morning or afternoon might not be a given, depending. And our kids surprise people, so it's not all by certain stereotypes or X, Y, Z, but while we have them in the building, we want to make the most of that time. The other reality is most kids are in school for 8 hours. We should be able to do right by them during that time, right? And so how do we restructure the day to do that? The last thing I'll say, they talked about partnership with schools, and I think schools absolutely need that partnership, and I think what I'm looking for in a partner, which Shaan knows, is also flexibility. Because I love the vision of our external tutors talking to our teachers all the time and being able to connect all the time. The reality is, we don't have time for that. Our teachers are on with kids or doing a whole host of other things. So what's the flexibility? Where can we get that communication across? Where can we get the information about the kid to all the adults who are caring for that kid and guiding that kid, but in an efficient way that might not look like all of our teachers are available for a half-hour conference once a week. Yeah. They're not.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight the point about being at school, because the opportunity gap widens at home. The child has to go to work, has to take care of their little brother or sister, or they don't have a parent that's around that can guide them to get online on a computer, let alone if they have the tech or internet. And so that is why it is critical for this to happen during the school day. And after school is candidly, it can be a bit of a cop-out.
So Shaan and Carolyn, Shaan, you mentioned earlier, in my former state, we got to crisis point where the National Guard had to be called in. Finding people right now is so difficult. Where are we finding these great tutors who can do this work?
Yeah, I mean, they're out there. There are so many mission-driven teachers and educators and paraprofessionals who want to support the children. They are mission-driven. They want to be there to support the kids, but not in the current construct of what our education system is like, where they're shouldering the burden of of all our social injustice. And that is fundamentally what's happening. And so they're there and ready to serve in a controlled and friendly environment where they're supported and where they are actually getting to experience the joy of teaching, where they are interfacing with 3 to 5 kids, and they're helping those kids feel seen. And I think there's no shortage of that, particularly of quality. And you have to, and honestly, to get scale, you have to also have great supports for those instructors. We have a whole cadre of mentor teachers that is regularly observing, coaching, training, and providing regular feedback to our teachers on how to improve their virtual instruction.
Carolyn, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would say once the pandemic hit, we saw a lot of teachers retiring early and coming to us and say, hey, I no longer want to be in the classroom, but I love working with kids. I want to tutor. And we also saw a lot of teachers just quit and decide that they want to do tutoring instead of being in the classroom every day. At Cignition, we really believe that the tutors need to be experienced teachers that have experience in the classroom and know the pedagogy. We have a rigorous interview process where we're looking for teachers that, and I'm talking about math online tutoring, we're looking for teachers that have experience in teaching math conceptually. I've been in interviews where the potential candidate will teach me a trick, like a butterfly method on how to add fractions with unlike denominators, and we don't want that type of teacher teaching the children in tutoring. You also need to have someone who is student-centered, who is letting students do the heavy lifting when it comes to solving math problems. You don't want someone who's just going to go in and lecture the students. And of course, you need to have a teacher that can relate to the students. That's critical. And once we find those high-quality teachers, we give them training on online collaborative learning, because it's different than being in the classroom. But they have the background of knowing the subject matter deeply, teaching conceptually, and being learner-driven.
So I'll give a 10-second lightning round here. Your advice to the people in this room on implementing high-dosage tutoring programs. And start with Emily, and we'll come down. 10 seconds.
All right. First of all, if there are adults interacting with your students, you are accountable for them too. So they were talking about all these supports that they provide their teachers. We observe our teachers that are from external partners. We give feedback. So just be mindful that any adult interacting with your kids is one of your adults as well. Right. Also, build it into your school day.
Donald?
Yeah, I think you need I think one thing I would leave you with is you need some form of a very rigorous curriculum that teaches foundational skills, especially at the elementary level. I think, again, I'm a literacy person. And I told my entire team, months before I left, during COVID, you have to focus on the literacy pieces. And I think high-dosage tutoring, if you get a curriculum that is of high quality and focuses on that can be expanded all the way up through high school.
And I'm going to have to cut you off for our 10 seconds because our countdown clock is moving fast. You have 7 seconds.
Oh my God. Okay, so as a tutoring vendor, I think one of the things that's so important is to give flexibility to the school districts. All school districts run differently, right? There's not one formula because every school is different. Every student is different. So build in that flexibility, and I'm a big proponent of having it during the school day.
Okay, and we're going to stop there. I'm sorry I didn't get to the last.
Don't cut
lightning
corners.
round.
Do not cut corners, guys. That is my
I'll do mine too. Do it. Just do it. There's lots of resources to help you do it.
Okay, and we will close on just do it. Thank you all. Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
coming.